Welcome back again. You're still watching us here on the Daily Debate. I would like to welcome once again my guest in the studio this evening, Dr. Emad Adly, head of the Egyptian Forum for Sustainable Development. Thank you once again for coming in. As we've seen in the report and we've seen in these fillers and promos that have been being aired, there's been a lot of talk and enthusiasm during the past couple of days about more mega projects to be implemented, specifically the fast train, and we were talking about the renovation of the transportation system here in Egypt. Now, as part of the development programs that the President Sisi is always keen in working very hard on, how do you see that whole project in specific from your perspective?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be here and to discuss such a very important and very crucial issue, actually. In fact, when we are talking about sustainable development, we are always talking about the two types of projects. And if the report is only focusing on the mega projects like the fast trains and the new train or transportation system in Egypt, this does not mean that we are only working on the mega projects. The mega projects are very important for the country for a number of reasons. I'm going to talk about them. But at the same time, we also see that the government and the leader of this country is very much also focusing on the small, medium, and the micro enterprises. Because we cannot have sustainable development without having the two parallel tracks going at the same time. But of course, when it comes to the transport sector, it has been for a long time. I personally attended many conferences in the last 20 years or even more, talking about the revolution in the transport sector, because it was one of the challenges and one of the weaknesses in Egypt. So President Sisi, he really had the courage to go for this with a very, I would say, strong and also optimistic, very optimistic plan, which I'm very pleased to see that it's coming to, to be a reality in the country. We are talking about the first step in December 2021 for the renovation of
all the old trains,
in the whole sector, and in 2 years we have
the new lines,
which covers in total
network from east to south, from north to
10,000 kilometers, which is a revolution by all means. It's the second revolution in the transport sector since the first revolution maybe during Muhammad Ali or something like that. So this is very good, and for environment and sustainable development, it's very important because the public transport is the first step that by which we can, first of all, minimize and reduce the emissions of the carbon dioxide and of using the private cars and the minibuses and the microbuses. And this reduction of emission helps in two ways. Number one, our global commitment to reduce the emissions at the global level, but at the very important point, the second point, which that it really
cuts down
the pollution, and also economically it's very important because what you are putting off subsidy and for importing
fuel and gas,
this is, you can use the gas, the natural gas inside, domestically, and what we have an extra, you can export it and you get foreign currency, and you don't import more of fuel that you need, the benzene for the cars. So, and the public transport is also part of the when you have fast, now we are talking about Cairo to Aswan, 4 hours. It has been a dream. When I travel and I see why every time, people traveling to Aswan, they feel like they have to spend the whole day.
Yes, that's true. If you're taking the train, it takes more than 10 hours. If you want to take a flight, that's very costly, of course, for middle and lower middle class.
This means that, if you take the train at 6 o'clock in the morning, you go out from your house in Cairo or in Giza or in Alexandria, and then you find yourself midday in Aswan, you finish your work, you are back again the same day. This is a revolution in which, this makes the economy makes
And then you
the
have
society.
tying from the Red Sea to Mediterranean as well. That's another boost in this field.
So by doing this, you are actually, I'm a person, always thinking about the environment, but in this case, we hit more than one bird, which is not good for the environment. But, we say that we hit more than one bird. We hit more birds. It's not only two birds, many birds, because we are reducing the emissions. You are accelerating, the movement in the country, and you make it much easier. You are actually affecting also the economy of the people and the overall expenditures of the people on the transport. And you are making efficiency and the productivity in the country. Altogether, they make a big difference.
Allow me to interrupt you for a second here, because you spoke about something I find it very interesting, because you said that you have been attending for the past 20 years a lot of talks and events and meetings that discuss this revolution, as you call it, in transportation. Nothing really has been done. President Sisi managed to make it happen in reality. Let's talk here about two things: the administration and the synchronicity of the different sectors when it comes to implementing this path, which I would call the Sustainable Development Agenda of 2030, and the costs, because we are also at a very tight budget, but yet we have always been a tight budget, if you want to think of it this way. What made it a reality during President Sisi's administration that was impossible to happen in previous administrations?
Once you have a vision, and you have also your team, with a vision and a team, which is very clear. We have President Sisi as the president of the country, and we have also Minister Kamel Wazir on the head of the Ministry of Transport. So having, a vision, and you have a team, a good team, and then you have also the partnerships that you have developed with other countries, because this is
technology from outside. Yes,
you are getting technology, you are getting financial support from some international financial institutions.
Yes.
Like the World Bank, like MFM, and so on. But you cannot get this money, and you cannot just get this technology and this partnership without having very strong political relationships and very good strategy on how you build this diplomacy with the partners outside the country, so they invest and they believe that investing in Egypt will be a priority for them. This is something that needs, as I said, the vision, and it needs a team that works together. And the teamwork that we have found on this is very, a good model that we have to think about it in all different sectors,
yes,
not only in this sector.
Of course, and that's why when we see any event that President Sisi inaugurates, and how he is very talented and wise in being very concerned with the details. I mean, I believe this is the only person who really gets into the details, indulges, knows everything, and numbers and capacities, and is just very, very aware of all these things, and very awake to the costs and the planning and the decision making, and how that would push and align or integrate these different ministries and these different involved institutions to implement this program. How does that manage time and versus cost? Because at the end of the day, everything is time versus cost, and this is where we see on various mega projects in Egypt being achieved with the lowest cost possible and in the shortest time possible.
Yeah, because the president, as you said, rightly said, he gets into the details. So even when some people say, "Oh, everyone," if someone tells the president, "I can do this in 2 years," and he tells him, "No, 1 year is enough," it is not
bargaining time.
It is not that the president is just putting the time as haphazardly. No, because the president has discussed this, and he knows about the details, and he knows that the time that is given to do the project is much more than the time that could be the time for the project. So it's not coming from a vacuum. He's coming from a very solid knowledge, and he gets, and I know from the stories that I heard from many people working in with ministers and stuff, that the president, he calls the ministers and he asks very specific questions, and he goes into the details and he gets all the information. So when he takes his his statement. He's not taking it, out of nothing. He knows that what he is saying is possible and it could be done. The whole thing is, as I said, vision, perseverance, commitment, and by doing this, and you think outside the box. This is something completely, different in this period. That we are now seeing projects that we have been always thinking about it like it's miracles or it's impossible.
Oh, we see them existing in developed countries, but,
exactly. But
we never thought it was going to be.
Happen.
And at this time where you have very strict austerity measures and a very strict financial struggle ongoing with the economy and the borrowings and all that. But again, and maybe here we can, from here, find a gateway to speak about the international level and not just the diplomacy and the strong political will and leadership regionally or internationally that Egypt has pursued, but also in terms of the trust. And we see that even during the pandemic, these institutions, these financial great institutions, have always praised Egypt on its positive economic performance despite these challenges. Again, how do these economists see it through their eyes, these developments? Because usually when you're talking on an ordinary citizen's level, they don't understand this idea.
Exactly, but the numbers are always, very clear to people, especially in the financial institutions. When they see, how we were able to, do your gross, net gross in the country, and you compare this with the previous years and you see how it's moving and your curve is going up for the financial institutions, they find that this is a very good country to invest. So it's not only that you have only the political will and you have the diplomacy and you have, the good relationship and the trust, but the trust is also based on numbers that you are presenting and you are showing. So this is why, while we had the pandemic, the struggle was how we keep always, the situation that even if we are not moving very quickly to achieve
that
our
we're still
objectives,
moving, we're not steady
moving,
or withdrawing back. Yes,
we're still moving,
like the rest of the world that went for 100% lockdown.
Exactly, but the curve was never went like horizontal. It was always going up, maybe little than what we were expecting, but it never went down like it happened in many countries, even the United States of America. And so this is what made the financial institutions found that the Egyptian economy is strong and is going on, very steady on the plan that it was put. Definitely, the whole world will never be able to achieve the 2030 objectives by 2030 because of the pandemic.
The pandemic slowed down greatly.
Exactly. But what would happen that at least, some countries will be above the average of the rest of the countries, and I think Egypt will be above.
Yes,
when
we speak of
average.
Egypt with these developmental projects, knowing that Egypt is a safe haven for multilateral types of investments of all sorts, unlike any other country in the world that is always obliged towards one or two things or three things that they either import or export and are very good at. But we're talking here about Egypt being delayed with this normal, natural progress that it should have always been doing and working at a very short time. And from here, let's talk about the cooperation, maybe the report mentioned about the CEO of the France world leading cargo shipping company, Rodolphe Saadi, and how they have exchanged, he has exchanged with President Sisi's plans on how France could help with the shipping process. Now, in light of working within a project that is as big and mega as these fast railways, how is that going to also further strengthen this investment relationship between France and Egypt?
First of all, we have to invest more in the capacity building of our workers and our people in the country. I mean, with the mega projects and the small and medium and micro projects, we have always to think about how we build the Egyptian personality itself.
To cope with these changes, definitely.
Exactly. But if we will only be having a number of people who are only working on these projects and the rest of the public are not going with the same level of capacity development, I think this will make it a little bit slower than what we expect. So what we need, for example, for the shipping issue, you have to look at the standards outside, and you can, you can definitely, when you go to visit any of our ports now, you will see, and you try to compare between the ports here and the ports outside, you will find some sort of difference. But we can, the reason that the French
Are you talking from an environment perspective here as an environmentalist or as an expert in sustainable? Because yeah, that's where the difference would appear.
Also, not only the environment, but the whole organization of the thing. We need to, to upgrade the skills of our workers to be able to meet the challenges that we are talking about. Now, if we have the train, for example, the end of the story is not to launch the train.
It's to keep the train as neat and new as it is. Yes,
Exactly.
I understand that.
So
that's a cultural perspective. Maybe the Ministry of Culture needs to work on that in this regard.
Exactly. So, and the education, Ministry of Education, because our children in the schools and our young people in the universities, they are the people who are going
you have to learn how to handle public property.
Exactly. So how we are going to maintain. So you have to build, you bring the technology, but you have to build the capacity and develop it in the country to be able to make it always, independent and to make the progress going always ahead. So I think bringing, the Germans, the French, the different, strong technology and countries that have the technology, this will also help us. You don't need to send people to learn outside, but by bringing these
expertise. I'm glad you mentioned this, because this was something I was going to ask you about, because it's part of the, I believe, the discussion that went on between the President and Saadi was the fact that they would be training or changing expertise. And here we're talking about not just on an average citizenship level, but also in terms of professionals that they would also keep upgraded to know how to handle this technology later on.
And we have to start doing this from, as I said, from the universities, and even before that from the schools. So the people, they know.
You mean introducing new topics and opening up new branches that would meet or integrate technology?
Courses. I don't need to change the curriculum, but at least the courses. I would like to see school children and university students making their visits, not to go to visit, Fayoum and Sokhna, and they have to have their technical trips. That every year they go, they have number of trips that they have to go and visit. They go and see.
That actually, we just want to just clarify that we do have this major gap between the public education and the private one, because the private ones, they would offer you internships where you actually go and train, and on that basis you'd be earning credits.
The majority
so maybe you need to integrate the fact that internships needs to be going in for this sort.
So education has to be going at the same level. Higher education has to go, especially higher education, has to go with the same passion of that we are doing on the mega projects and all the different business modalities that we have in the country. Because by doing this, you are actually building the infrastructure, the real infrastructure of the human being. Having, the environmental background in my whole career, this helps me, is that I'm always thinking about how I reduce the consumption to the level that, I can keep it forever sustainable. So this is why I'm very happy with the revolution we have in transport, because number one, as I said, the public transport will minimize the use of the private and small cars. Number two, that the emissions will be much less. But the most important thing for me, that the pollution will be much less, and this will affect, of course, the health of the people and the public. The other thing which is very important as well from the environmental point of view, that the consumption, not only about energy, we should not think only about energy, we have to think also about water. Water is our main challenge in this country. We only have the River Nile. We don't have any other source. It's only surface. 95% of our water is surface water, and our population is increasing dramatically. We are 100 million now, and every year 2 million and more are increasing. So this means that in 10 years we will be more than 120 million. So this means that all our projects have to be also having in mind how we are going to use our water resources in wisely, and always we are minimizing the consumption while we are, because we have more people every day.
Yeah, well, people should stop having more people, and parents should stop having more people every day. Yes, we're going to talk more about, because you mentioned environment, and here let's talk about, through this report, on another issue that President Assisi had also ordered, and that's the completion of a system for using or dealing with solid waste. So let's take a look at this report. We'll be right back.
Okay.
President Assisi ordered the completion of a system for dealing with solid waste. He directed officials to ensure integrating efforts to safeguard the environment in line with the state's general strategy for good governance of environmental systems and natural resources, mainly with regard to expanding the use of clean energy from natural gas. President Assisi also ordered the completion of a system for dealing with solid waste and expansion in projects to produce biofuels from waste. He made the remarks at a meeting held with Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli, Planning Minister Hala Said, Petroleum Minister Tariq Al-Mullah, Finance Minister Mohammed Mait, Tourism Minister Khalid Anani, Culture Minister Ines Abdedaim, and Environmental Minister Yasmin Fouad. According to the spokesman, the meeting touched on efforts to develop the environment sector nationwide. The Environment Minister reviewed her ministry's efforts to reduce pollution, preserve natural resources, address the impact of climate change, and integrate the environmental dimension into various sectors via coordination and cooperation with all ministries. Worth mentioning that joint efforts between various ministries have helped improve the air quality in Cairo and the Nile Delta through developing the national network for monitoring industrial emissions and eradicating the black cloud, as well as upgrading infrastructure for natural reserves.
Welcome back again. You're still watching us here on the Daily Debate. Dr. Emad Adly, head of the Egyptian Forum for Sustainable Development. We're still continuing with you now. It's very important for us to talk about this important order that President Assisi has ordered for, and dealing with solid waste. And I think that was also a chronicle, if I may say, from a medical expression issue that's here in Egypt. So what was... I'm not going to talk about what's been the barrier for this to actually been implemented, but tell us more about the solid waste, and why is this new project going to also be beneficial for the Egyptian environment?
Look, I've been very much close to the issue of solid waste management for almost 25 or even more years. The point is, in the whole world, and even I organized some field trips, study tours to some of the countries to learn about their experience in the solid waste management. The rule is, if you have, solid waste, and you calculate how much you need to solve this problem, you cannot sacrifice the problem by putting, budget less than what you need. Means that if the whole system needs this amount of money, we have to provide this amount of money. The problem that we are always facing is, and also the challenge is, that how we are going to collect this money. Because the bill will be really high if you are putting exactly how much people have to pay for the solid waste collection and management in general.
Are you talking about people as citizens, or who
I'm
are the
talking
people?
I'm talking about how much you need to run the system.
Yes.
And while you are running the system, you have to invest by bringing either private sector, or you invest as a country, as a government. But at the end of the day, the system has to be always with plus at the end, not with the negative. If you are, unless you are, you put very clearly how much you are going to subsidize the system. But at the end, you have to spend, what you need to do this. So the challenge has been always how much we can offer to use the system. But plus this, you have also to have the system which has 4 components. Number 1, the law is very important. And we have the law now. Still, we are working on the executive regulations, but the law is there, which is, I would say it's the core issue of the thing. Number 2, the technology. You have to look at the technology, how we are going to collect, because the technology means the equipment that you are going to use. You cannot put a technology that, a truck that is open from the back, and then you collect the garbage, and then you spread it all over.
Oh yeah, that's only in cartoons, I believe. It doesn't happen in reality. Yeah.
Exactly. So the technology that you are, how you are going to deal with the solid waste. We're talking about villages. We're talking about low-income districts, medium income districts, high income. You have to have the technology, which is different from one to one. Number three, you have to have the human knowledge and experience. And number four, you have to have the awareness. So if you have,
maybe we start by awareness. Let's talk about that first. Are you talking about as an individual household, myself, I need to be able to have this awareness to remove or extract my solid waste from other wastes to make it easier for the other process to go? Is that what you mean?
This is of course a dream, which is not, you know, an impossible dream. But we have been always teaching and raising the awareness of communities, even in a very poor districts, and it was already in the culture, by the way. Even if we are talking about it's a culture issue that our country is not clean as we all want to have it clean. But in the culture, when I was young and I go to the village, I used to see my grandmother, you know, separating between the organic waste that she was using for the, you know, in the backyard with the animals she is growing there, and the solid waste to collect and to put it somewhere when someone come and collect it. So we used to see the villages very clean.
We see new cities and the new urban areas that are being developed. We see that very clearly even in public streets. To be very honest, you have different solid bins, different bins for different types of wastes. We see that also in certain districts, but you're talking about the majority level, that this awareness needs to be implemented to help the other process or the other components to come along smoothly, right?
Yes, but I also want to have a system that is completely closed system. Like if I even separate, do I see the garbage collector coming with two containers, one for the organic and one for the solid and one for the glasses? Still, we are making the separation, but at the end of the day, we are collecting not with the same system.
Exactly, definitely.
Yeah, so you need to have the whole system. And so the technology is part, which is all the alternatives that I'm talking about. The garbage bin is part of the
which country in the world has the best technology in terms of managing its solid waste? That Egypt is going to be very closely wanting to take that as
from the Arab region, of course.
I'm not talking about that. I was hoping you would say Japan, for instance, or other countries.
Japan, of course. Japan, you know, in Japan, you will never see, it's impossible that you see a garbage bin anywhere. It's all hidden in the system. So it is inside houses, inside, you know, in the backyards of so you will never see one garbage bin in any place, in any street, and you cannot see it with your eyes. So Japan is a very difficult and very complicated model, which is unique. But I'm talking about
Singapore, for instance. Also.
Singapore, Belgium. We took some, as I said, tour studies, study tours. We took them to Belgium. We took them to France. Of course, Germany is also a good model. The whole thing at the Netherlands.
Yes, I was just going to say the Netherlands is a very interesting model.
Very good model, very good model. The whole thing is that, you know, the package, the whole package, you know, from the households to the shops, to the street vendors, to everyone knows exactly
what they're going to do.
Exactly.
So that's from an environmental perspective / cultural awareness perspective, but on you know, in a governmental or a leadership level, what's the benefit from dealing with solid waste? How beneficial would that be for the economy?
Definitely, when you have a clean country, this makes people are more attracted to come. It's very good for tourism, of course, fantastically for tourism, very good for investors, very good for your health, very good for your image.
What about recycling these solid wastes? Can they be recycled?
This is part of the system. When I talk about the system, when I talk about technology, I'm talking about, you know, the whole thing from the
A to Z,
separation,
yes.
from the separation to the collection to the sorting at the end, to the reuse, to the recycling, to the dumping at the end. But some people are using the landfills for dumping. Some countries now stop completely landfills, and they are at the end using waste to energy. And we heard the president talking about waste to energy in one of the meetings very recently, I would say a week or 2 weeks ago. So, so we have all the technology that we can use for the whole steps, for all the different steps. But at the end of the day, we have to calculate how much we need and how skills that we need to have for all the people working in this field, and how we are going
apply
to
this technology.
enforce the law to be sure that it is going to happen.
Well, that was a very interesting issue to talk about, but definitely we want to discuss it later, for instance, because I'm sure that this handling or dealing with solid waste has a lot of criteria and a lot of dimensions that, if I may say, that should be covered later on. Dr. Emad Adly, head of the Egyptian Forum for Sustainable Development, thank you for joining me on the Daily Debate.
Thank you very much for having me.
And that brings us to the end of our episode of the Daily Debate. The top stories are coming up next. Stay tuned.